Can you create an entire program with just one sandbag? Yes. In fact, if I had to start over from scratch and rebuild my home gym, that's exactly what I would do. With one sandbag and some good old-fashioned hard work, you'll be well on your way to building a body that is jacked, strong, and ready for action. Before we get into how I would set up the program, there are a few important details we need to go over. First, we need to discuss the type of sandbag you'll be using. While a lightweight sandbag is great for conditioning and will provide a novel stimulus when used in place of other, more traditional tools to perform basic movements like presses and rows, in my opinion, this defeats the purpose of a program like this. If we are going to center an entire program around sandbag training, I believe we should focus on what makes the sandbag so unique, rather than viewing it as nothing more than a replacement tool for dumbbells or barbells. Effective sandbag training is actually very simple and is made up of three main parts: the lift, the carry, and the shoulder. These three movements will lay the foundation of our program, which means the sandbag we use needs to be heavy enough to make these exercises difficult. This leads me to our second point, what I'll refer to today as the break-in period. If you've never lifted a sandbag before, it's very likely that your body won't be ready to lift a sandbag that suits your current strength level. What I mean is this: if you can deadlift 400 pounds with a barbell, your muscles are probably strong enough already to use a 200-pound bag for this program, but you first need to condition yourself to this form of training. Sandbag lifting requires mobility and strength from awkward angles you're probably not used to. On top of that, you're not yet stable enough to lift a heavy bag. The supportive structures of your body, the parts that support you and make you stable on your feet, need time to grow stronger. Muscles can recover in a few days, largely due to the constant stream of nutrient-rich blood they receive, but tendons can take much longer, often requiring months to adapt to a new training stimulus. What I found personally was it took just about 3 months using a sandbag once a week before I felt my body change. A 100-pound sandbag felt way heavier than I thought it had any right to for a long time, but around that 3-month mark, it was as if things suddenly fell into place and my body was ready. My bicep tendons were actually visibly thicker, and I just felt solid overall. It was at this point I started using a much heavier sandbag, and while I have become much stronger in the almost 2 years it's been since I first started lifting it, I still find it's heavy enough to act as an effective training tool, which just goes to show how long a one sandbag program can work for you. For someone new to sandbag lifting, this break-in period is both a good and possibly a bad thing. Bad because you'll most likely need to buy 2 sandbags at the start, a lighter bag to get your body ready, and a heavier bag for once you've gone through that initial conditioning phase. The good is pretty great though. If you're lucky enough to have never lifted a sandbag before, get ready, because a training phase like this doesn't come around often. If you stick with it and give your body the proper recovery tools it needs, as in rest and food, then you're in for a real transformation. Sandbag lifting will change your body in the best ways possible, and the changes can happen fast. More muscle everywhere, better posture and mobility, and a feeling of confidence in how you hold yourself. Needless to say, sandbag lifting is very effective. Now back to our sandbag-only program. With these ideas in mind, the sandbag you choose to use for this program is up to you and will depend on where you are currently at physically. As a general guideline though, I think most people should be able to work up to a 150 to 250 pound bag within a few months. Finally, before we get to the actual program, there is one last thing I'd like to mention. I believe you will get more out of sandbag lifting if you treat it as a skill rather than an exercise. Technique is very important here, and developing it properly from the start will lead to infinitely better gains down the line. You can compare sandbag lifting to Olympic lifting if you'd like. When Olympic lifters want to get better at the snatch, how do they train? Certainly not with sets of 10 to failure. An Olympic lifter spends most of their time working with sets of 3, maybe 5 or less. This allows them to perform every rep with solid technique. We want to do the same with our sandbag. This means that rather than low sets, high reps, 3 sets of 10 being a prime example, we'll be spending most of our time with high sets, low reps, think 10 sets of 3. This doesn't mean the training will be easy. Far from it, actually. What it means is that every single rep we do is important. You must put every ounce of effort you have into every single rep you do. Now on to the program. As I mentioned earlier, effective sandbag training is made up of 3 main parts: the lift, the carry, and the shoulder. These 3 movements will lay our foundation, but because we'll be lifting the sandbag from the ground every time we train, regardless of which exercise we're doing, we won't need a dedicated day just for the lift. Instead, we'll be adding in sandbag squats, which in a way mimic the lift from the lap to chest height. While you could set up the program however you'd like, I personally have the best training sessions when I'm able to focus on one of these main movements at a time, rather than doing them all on the same day. So that's how the program will be set up here. We'll be using a 3 days per week split, Monday, Wednesday, Friday if you'd like, and on each of these days we'll focus on one of our main movements. Monday will be the sandbag to shoulder, Wednesday will be sandbag squats, and Friday will be the sandbag carry. After our main movement for the day, we'll also be doing some basic calisthenics. No pull-up bar required, but I'll get into that soon. Starting with the sandbag to shoulder on Monday, our goal here is to eventually work up to 15 shoulders per side. This part will require a bit of self-awareness, but to start, try to shoulder your sandbag once every 2 minutes, putting everything you have into every attempt. Stop once you notice you're barely able to complete the lift. So week 1, you might only make it to 7 shoulders per side for a total of 14 lifts. That's perfect, and you now have room to improve. Next time you repeat this workout, try for at least 8 shoulders per side. Eventually you'll make it all the way to 15 per side. If you can't increase your total number of attempts for a few weeks, that's okay. Your body is just adapting. Realistic progression might look something like this. Week 1, you get 7 per side, week 2, 8 per side, weeks 3 through 6, 10 per side, week 7, 11 per side, and weeks 8 through 10, 12 per side, and so on. Eventually, when you make it to 15 shoulders per side, you can start adding in some variation. This program will make use of a progression model similar to the Hepburn method. So once you manage 15 shoulders per side, next week you might do 1 shoulder per side using the 1 motion technique and 14 with your regular technique. And the following week try for 2 1 motion attempts per side, and so on. This should keep you busy for a very long time. Moving on to our Wednesday squat session, week 1 will be 10 sets of 3 reps with 2 minutes rest between sets. This may feel easy to you, but don't rush the process. Rather than adding too many reps straight away, focus on making every rep you do as explosive as possible. We'll be using that Hepburn progression method here as well, only this time we'll be adding reps. Week 1 will be 10 sets of 3, week 2 is 1 set of 4, 9 sets of 3, week 3 is 2 sets of 4, 8 sets of 3, and so on until you're up to 10 sets of 5. From here, you can start adding variation such as pause squats or squatting with the sandbag on your shoulder. Again, this should keep you busy for a very long time. Our carry session on Friday will be the most straightforward. We'll be doing 5 sets to failure with whichever variation you'd prefer. The main thing here is to track your progress. If you're lifting in a small room, count how many times you can go back and forth and try to beat that number next workout. You can do the same carry variation for each set, but mixing it up will keep things interesting. I'd probably do 2 sets of bear hug carries, 2 sets of shoulder carries, 1 per side, and finish with a horizontal carry with the bag held near waist level. Try to improve on at least one of your sets every single week. Make sure to rest until you're back near baseline between every set. It may take you 5 minutes, and that's just fine. That's going to be it for the sandbag portion of the program. Basic but effective. You may have noticed though that our program has a major weakness. There's no pressing work. Well, that's where calisthenics comes in. I said this is a sandbag only program, and I meant it. That is the only piece of equipment you'll need, but if you have enough space to lift a sandbag, you have enough space to do some push-ups. We will be focusing on 2 main calisthenics movements, the horizontal push-up and the vertical push-up. Both of these movements are infinitely scalable and will be enough to keep you busy forever most likely. Let's look at how to scale each of these. The horizontal push-up, or the basic push-up, can be made increasingly more difficult by leaning further forward and turning the movement into a pseudo-planche push-up. The eventual end goal here would be push-ups with your feet floating in the air, aka the full planche push-up. The vertical push-up, or pike push-up, can be made more difficult by slowly placing more of your body weight on your hands rather than your feet. This can be accomplished by first doing pike push-ups on the ground, then with your feet on your sandbag, then handstand push-ups with your feet against the wall, and eventually deficit handstand push-ups with your feet against the wall, or freestanding if you're interested in the skill side of things. After your sandbag work on Monday, Wednesday, and Friday, you'll be doing 2 sets each of a horizontal push-up variation and a vertical push-up variation for 8 to 30 reps per set. The eventual end goal would be 2 sets of 30 full planche push-ups and 2 sets of 30 deficit handstand push-ups. Anyone who can do that is a freak of nature and has no business listening to me, as they've far outgrown anything I have to say. Just to clarify further, the variation you do depends on where you're at currently. If you can only do 20 regular push-ups in a set, try working on that until you can do 30. Then move on to a pseudo planche push-up and keep going from there. If you can already do 30 pike push-ups on the floor, you might want to start with the feet elevated version and work at that. And that's it. This program is basic, but that doesn't mean it's not effective. If you put in the work, you will build a yoked body that's ready to take on anything. Now, before I go, I will add one thing here. If your main focus is bodybuilding, this program will work for you, but you may wish to add in a few sets a week for your arms and neck. They will grow from the basic program, but after a while, these areas may start to fall behind somewhat. So add a few sets if you'd like, but it's not necessary, and your entire body will still grow from the program regardless.